Got a release from the news from a rather law office yesterday, and I thought they brought up a pretty unique situation. I mean, January is over, the holiday season over. Normally, we're all back into routine right now. That would include parents of children who have separated or divorced. Back to school, normally that's what's happening this time of the year. That's not the case this year with the state of emergency. There are so many questions in the lockdown or the stay-at-home order about, custody agreements, even, in precarious employment times. I imagine there's got to be some issues with support payments as well. That's why we reached out to Alyssa Bach. She is an associate lawyer with Shulman Partners. Alyssa, good morning.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, a tough situation for everybody, and it's got to be even tougher if you're trying to maintain a pretty decent relationship when your relationship has ended, but you've got children out of that relationship.
Yeah, it's definitely a time for difficulty for co-parents right now. It's a time of uncertainty for all of us, and then it's that heightened difficulty when parents are trying to sort out, we've got children together, what does this mean for our existing schedule when, for example, they're at home for schooling, right? You're expecting them to go back into school, make your work accommodations accordingly, and now you're looking at it and going, okay, how can we work around this?
Yeah. So, what are you recommending at Shulman Partners that couples with separation agreements and custody agreements do?
We are continuing to encourage that parents follow their existing custody and access arrangements, and if changes are required, working to negotiate with your co-parent a resolution that works for you before going into the court. Now, for some parents, they're dealing with being frontline workers, or they're dealing with heightened concerns with respect to COVID-19, or you've got parents who still have to be attending at work in person, but the child is online learning. Like, those things could require parents to work out some kind of rejigging of their parenting schedule. But otherwise, looking at maintaining the status quo, keeping your current arrangements as much as you can.
What are the rules, Alyssa, when it comes to, maybe making a few changes in an arrangement that has been arranged through a family court? Can you just do it ad hoc as lay people, or do you have to have it, reheard in court?
You don't necessarily have to have it reheard in court. One thing that we always encourage is making sure that any changes are in writing, that it's discussed and it's understood, the nature of it. Is it temporary for the sake of COVID? Is it that your job has changed? Is it that it's just one weekend, right? Making sure that things are really clear, because the major issues come up when all of a sudden you've made this arrangement and then there's a misunderstanding about the nature of that arrangement later. And the longer it's been going on, then you're assessing, okay, well, is this the better arrangement that would require a whole new order, or can we still revert back to the original order? So just being really clear up front and making sure that you have those things in writing with your co-parent.
I've heard of cases, Alyssa, of parents who have frontline jobs in healthcare. I mean, they're in it every day. They have a high risk of exposure if they don't be very, very, very careful. That the other person in the relationship is concerned about the child seeing them. Have you heard of that?
Yeah, it's definitely something that we saw a lot, especially during this first wave. So when we first went into the state of emergency back in March and nobody had any idea what was happening, that was one of the major concerns. And what we saw coming out of the courts at that time is that with frontline workers, as much as they have that heightened exposure, there's also heightened expectation that they know how to follow protocols, that they are following protocols, and that they're really taking their safety seriously because of that increased exposure risk. And so unless there was something, for example, a medical condition on the other side that was going to have some kind of serious repercussions with COVID, that we saw the court still considering that parenting schedules should be followed.
A lot of people are still trying to figure out what this new restriction order is all about that came into effect early this morning, Alyssa. I'll give you an example. If you maybe every second weekend take your child to the child's father, is that considered essential travel?
Well, how I look at it is that when your parents have a separated relationship, your child has two homes. So when you're looking at a stay-at-home order, still seeing their other parent is still staying at home, right? So when you've got the court saying that parenting schedule should still be enforced, that unless it's a situation where, again, we are seeing parents who live in other jurisdictions where maybe travel is a lot further. And so when we've got this stay-at-home order that does have at this point a set end date, perhaps looking at temporary arrangements, depending on what your particular circumstances are. But otherwise, if it's something that is easily facilitated, especially if the two of you are in the same jurisdiction, then to still remain with the existing schedule.
Yeah, I mean, it technically still is another household, and we're not supposed to be doing that. And I could see concern as well, Alyssa, if that second household is a multi-generational one, or there are 3 other kids living there as well.
Yeah, and these are all things that we've seen coming up throughout the COVID-19 pandemic, and we are almost a year into it now. And so even though we've got this stay-at-home order, which looks new, we also had a stay-at-home order back in March. I remember going on the streets and going, where are all the cars? And so with parents, it is something that even though we're kind of seeing it in new wording perhaps, it's really got the same meaning behind it, that unless you've got the concerns that the other parent isn't following proper COVID protocols, and you're at a heightened risk, for example, that could be a reason for changing an arrangement. But otherwise, you're looking at it that there's an expectation that you're both following COVID-19 protocols, that neither of you are seeing any other family members, that even if you have a multi-generational home, that everybody in that home is also staying somewhere. So really, the only movement are the children, which there is inherently going to be an increased exposure. But if everybody's then taking the proper precautions because they know that they're doing it for the benefit of their kids and seeing their parents.
All right, last question for you, Alyssa, support payments. We've seen an economy that's been devastated, people out of work, people applying for CERB, et cetera, et cetera. Is the FRO busier than normal? Have you heard?
I haven't had any cases with the Family Responsibility Office during the COVID time, but what we have been encouraging parties to do is talk to your co-parent, talk to them about the reason why you're looking for a reduction. Is it something that's temporary? Are you looking for alternate opportunities? If you've lost your current employment, is there other temporary employment that you could be obtaining? But looking at temporary solutions. I know that this pandemic has been going on for a lot longer than what anybody would have expected, but it's something that you want to be solution focused and looking at those temporary measures that can get people through.
All right, Alyssa, difficult times for everyone, but I thought this was an important issue for a lot of Ontarians. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Alyssa Bach. She is an associate lawyer at Shulman Partners here in the city.